Welcome back to A Life Worth Living, a place for real and raw conversations with people from all different walks of life. In a world with social media where people's best lives are on display, we all need refreshing reminders that no one is perfect and you are not alone. This is where you hear the greatest life lessons from the most incredible life stories. A daily reminder of how beautiful this life is and how life is truly worth living. Today we are talking with Dr. Hillary Taggart. Dr. Hillary is an expert aesthetic injector with more than 7 years of experience. Hillary is passionate about finding true self-worth from within. In today's episode, we touch on topics like shame and judgmental stereotypes, as well as diving deep as we open up about suicidal ideations and how to best support those who are struggling.
Hey, Dr. Hillary! Oh my gosh, I just want to call you Hillary, but Dr. Hillary...
You can call me Hillary.
You have so much experience in life and all that you do, and I'm so excited to have you here. We had a conversation, and I was just like, man, I've got to have you come on because you have so many good things to say. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
First, I want to kind of help everyone get to know you a little bit. What is it that you do?
So, Dr. Hillary, so I'm a nurse
Yes.
practitioner. I have a doctorate in nursing, so I'm not a physician, but do have a doctorate degree. I primarily I own a med spa and do cosmetic injectables. So Botox, fillers, PRP, all that fun stuff.
Yes.
Got into a route I never would have thought in a million years
Really?
I would ever be in. No, I wrestled growing up with boys in high school.
What?
Yes, I was a total tomboy. So
Oh
to
my
me,
gosh.
to think about being like this pretty girl in aesthetics was so
Yeah.
far from my mind at all. But kind of fell into it happenstance, and here we are 8 years later, and I love it. I absolutely love it. I work primarily with
Wow.
women, and it's actually it's been amazing in my life. I really, really enjoy what I do.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's the most important thing. So I'm so glad that you love it and you're so passionate about it. With the line of work that you're in, we get a lot of people who, I would say, judgmental in some ways. When they're like, oh, you're getting all this Botox and filler, you're changing the way you look and all these things. As someone who's in that industry and as somebody who, works with people one-on-one, I know that there are a lot of doctors out there who don't prioritize the client as much and what they want. That's something I love about you is that you strictly do what they want, not what you think. And you don't pressure them into getting more units of Botox or like, oh, I think you should do lip filler too. You're very, very much so helping them just make the decision on their own. And I love that. How has that looked like working with people one-on-one and navigating those relationships and helping people make those decisions in the right way for the right reasons?
Yeah, it's interesting. As I've gotten into this industry, a couple things. I've dealt with my own issues with this industry, the aesthetic industry. There's been a couple times where I honestly almost quit it because
Wow.
I felt that there are a lot of things that go against the grain of who I am as a person. But it's been very interesting that instead of quitting and taking myself elsewhere, I've decided to stay and bring who I am to the industry. And
I love that.
it's been very powerful.
Bring
And-
who you are to the industry.
Yeah. So for
Yes.
me, I looked at it and I saw I don't like the industry because I felt like it was, XYZ and didn't feel like it represented people like myself who I want to age well. I want to look nice. That's important to me. It's not the biggest priority in my life. And there were so many people out there that were going to these med spas that were being pressured into doing more, being upsold. The other thing, there's two things that I really disagree with my industry that I think happens a lot. Number one is being upsold or pressured into buying more.
Yeah.
And it's almost like some people, they take advantage of women and men, but mainly women because it's mostly women in the industry, their emotional vulnerability so that they can get sales. Because you think to yourself, well, I want to look pretty or I want to look nice or I just went through this divorce or I just, whatever, I'm menopausal and things are changing or whatever happens to bring the woman in. And some providers sense that and take advantage of that so that they can make greater money. And that's just me. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
And it has no integrity to it. And I was raised to be a person of integrity. So that's been really hard for me. So I flip that on its head. And so when people come in, I say, well, what concerns you? And they say, well, what do you think I should have? And I said, well, what concerns you? And if it doesn't concern you, it doesn't matter. Just because I can quote unquote fix it means nothing. If it doesn't bother you. And that's the other most important thing is so many people in this industry In fact, I was in Mexico last week, and I was sitting in the hot tub and ended up meeting a cute girl from Utah who was adorable. And we started talking about it and stuff. And she said, and I've heard this so many times before from women, and this illustrates another point that's really challenging for me in my industry. She said, I went in to get Botox this one time, but they told me that I needed all this stuff, and I left feeling bad about myself.
Oh.
And it broke my heart. And I've heard that so many times. And I just think that is so wrong for us as a provider. Because even though we're aesthetic provider, we're still a healthcare provider, and healthcare providers should be about healing.
Yes.
And helping people. So I've taken who I am and the strong beliefs that I have. And as I focus on doing what's right for the best for the client, for helping the client feel educated and empowered, my business has grown exponentially because I'm doing what's right for people. And not only that, the business growth is wonderful. Let's be honest. We're all in here to make money.
Well, yeah.
But ultimately, I love what I do because I've found something that's enjoyable, and I do it with integrity.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really important.
Well, and in that way, you're creating impact.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I feel like regardless, when we're able to do that, we feel so much more fulfilled. We feel so much better going to sleep at night.
Yep.
We feel like there's purpose. And I just love what you said about taking who you are into the industry and making that your focus. And I think that we can all see that in different ways in whatever industry we're in. Yeah. As influencers and content creators, there's just this, and there's this constant pressure to appear perfect. Yeah. And people are just wanting to see the perfect, cute pictures, and they want to see the cute, perfect couples, and they want to see, all these different things. And at the time when I started doing this, I ended up switching over, and I wanted to sooner, but the people that I had in my life at the time, they were had a lot of resistance to being different and sharing openly and raw and being vulnerable. It was a big shift to make, but it was so true to who I am that I just broke free, it felt like. And I felt like I could finally be me when I got to this point where I decided, you know what, I'm going to bring who I am to the industry. And I want to be real. I want to be raw. I'm a very open person. Very, very open. Mm-hmm. Maybe too much sometimes.
I'm the same way, so I totally understand.
Yeah. So I'm I just want to do that. And I feel like that, a lot of people might have resistance where they're like, ooh, that's uncomfortable. TMI, or, people don't like airing dirty laundry. So they're like, ooh, that's embarrassing. Why would you share that? But I love it because I knew it would have helped me. As I've been doing it, the messages that I get just is such a huge reminder to me to keep going.
Yes. And,
it's very uncomfortable. There's times where I've shared things that are so vulnerable that is very uncomfortable.
For sure.
But being uncomfortable is good.
And I think it's interesting. I think that we think that people want picture perfect, but people don't. People don't. They do what not. It's a very interesting psychological phenomenon to me that we put in other people's minds what we believe, even though it's not the truth. So we think that people want picture perfect, but the reality is especially nowadays, people are craving real and authenticity. Yep. But it's not that people we think that want it, it's that we're not okay to be vulnerable. We're scared. Yeah. It's scary to make ourselves vulnerable and put ourselves out there. As women who are taught that we need to look hot, beautiful, sexy, put together, skinny, all these different things expectations that are put on us. We have those expectations. So for me, I try really, really hard never to use filters on my Instagram stories. Mm-hmm. And there's some times where I look at my stories and I'm like, oh my gosh, I look so awful in those pictures, or the lighting. And I've done ones of me. I had COVID a couple weeks ago, and I was in bed and I had my pink, big old bathrobe on and I looked like crap. But I specifically am very cautious about that because people don't want to keep on seeing these unrealistic versions because it makes them feel bad about themselves. Yeah. And it's unrealistic, unattainable, unachievable, and it's not real life. And I think as social media has grown, maybe in the beginning people wanted that and they thought, oh, this is cute. And people are going back and going, no, we want real, we want authentic, and reject those picture perfect sites, bloggers, influencers, whomever.
I'm just so grateful that I pushed to do that when it wasn't a huge thing at the time. And I'm so grateful that it's gotten more popular now.
Yeah.
People are more willing to do that because it creates an impact. I've posted several videos or several things of me crying. And I thought I would get more comments like this, but I actually haven't gotten it a ton. But sometimes I'll get comments where people are like, wow, why would you post a video of you crying? Like, you're just trying to get attention, like, you know, whatever. And I'm glad I didn't get tons of comments like that. But the thing is that we all are crying. We're all having hard days. And I get messages from girls all the time. Thank you for showing when you're not looking your best, having like your hair done and your makeup. You're just vulnerable and crying, like the most vulnerable, like maybe unattractive like way you can be. But people, they are in those same positions all the time, and seeing that lets them know that it's okay. It's okay to not be okay sometimes.
I think it's important. I think as human beings, you know, we talk about don't compare, don't judge. And the truth is, as human beings, we compare and we judge.
Yeah.
That is
very natural.
It's very natural. It is part of our safety mechanisms as humans to compare and contrast and to judge. Is this safe? Is this good? Is this right? Is this bad? All of those different things. And so I think we're always going to compare. Now we have to keep it in check. And if we're comparing so much, that's making us feel bad about ourselves.
Yeah.
Or maybe we've gone too far. But I mean, I know for myself, I'm constantly comparing. Am I in different ways to make sure? And it's a good thing. Like if I'm comparing myself to some of my friends who maybe I admire that are great spouses, great wives, great moms, I compare and I say, wow, that's really amazing. She does that with her children. I want to do that. So
it can be inspirational.
It can be inspirational.
Motivating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important when we talk about that, we realize that people are comparing themselves. They are judging us. It doesn't always have to be a negative thing. And so by us choosing to be vulnerable, it helps others feel okay when they're at. Because if there are people that are struggling, and we're all struggling, really, I mean, we are all struggling. It just depends on the day or the hour.
Yeah.
And the severity over the years, right?
Yeah.
And so then the question is as we are quote unquote influencing, and that can be somebody with 2 followers on Instagram or 2 million.
Every single person.
Or walking into the gas station or at church or wherever it is, we all have influence. So how are we choosing to use our influence to help others and be positive? And that's by being real. It's by being kind. It's by breaking down our egos and saying, you know what, you're right. I was wrong here. I'm sorry. So that we can all just have a better sense of community, better sense of understanding for each other and compassion and forgiveness, that we all have our bad moments and that's normal and it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I'm really passionate about that. And I'm really passionate about no judgment, no shame, loving people unconditionally. Everyone has their own higher power. I really, truly believe, you know, in Jesus Christ and, you know, my Heavenly Father. And for me, the example that was set, you know, as you learn more about Christ and how he sees people through a totally different perspective. Yeah. And that's something that I love, is being able to see people through Christ's eyes. And if that's not your higher power, just seeing people as they really are. And, you know, if you were to be able to see every aspect, know their heart, know their thoughts, know what they've gone through that's made them who they are. If they're struggling now, it's for a reason, you know, and that's helped me deal with judgmental people, where I'm like, they were raised a certain way. They were conditioned a certain way. They have these views and beliefs because they have their own negative core beliefs. They have their own fears. The different things that lead people to judgment are oftentimes negative core beliefs or insecurities, and we project onto other people. And we do this all the time, even if we're not necessarily a very judgmental person, but we all judge. We all have, you know, things like you were just saying, we all compare. But, you know, when it gets to an unhealthy part, you know, it's really important to be able to take a step back and look at that. So I come to you for Botox, and I didn't get Botox until
I think a year or two ago.
Yeah. And I was honestly very nervous. Yeah. And I told you, I was like, I want to share this with my followers. And it was very nerve-wracking and very vulnerable for me, actually, because I know that the culture we live in, at least where we are at, you know, in Utah, a lot of people are very judgmental of that sometimes. I know that I have a lot of friends who are influencers who just get trashed for, you know, getting Botox or lip fillers or, changing the way they look or whatever. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be vulnerable because I don't want people to think that I'm insecure about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want people to just assume my intentions or, why I'm doing this. And because I know that I'm coming from a very healthy mindset in place. And that was hard for me because, people don't always understand or know us and our thoughts and our hearts. You and I talked a lot about doing these things for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to this industry or a lot of other industries. But ultimately it's really an incredible conversation to have when we talk about overcoming that shame and the judgment, and not only from other people, but from ourselves.
And I think there's two things. As you were talking earlier about kind of where everybody's at, I just want to touch on that real fast because I think this and a very, very important lesson that I learned a couple years ago through, it's a long story, but I had an experience where I was able to truly see with more spiritual eyes, that my eyes were open. And a theme that's kind of stuck with me that I felt was whispered to me is we're all just doing the best that we can, which sounds really simple and almost cliche, but when you really think about it, and for me, the experience that I had was such a spiritual experience where I felt and I could see different people in my life and who they are. And it's almost like I could understand their past and see how that made them them.
Yes.
And so sometimes, it's easy to go down the freeway, okay? and somebody's swerving or driving fast, and we make quick judgments, right? And we say, oh, that, XYZ expletive, thinks that they're better or they're whatever. And, as far as they could have just had a call from a loved one who broke an arm or ended up in the hospital or is in labor. You know what I mean? You just never know the situation.
Yeah.
It's same thing with people and choices that they make in other aspects. We're all just doing the best that we can. And I think that that's something that as I found myself being judgmental about people's decisions, I just remind myself of that they're just doing the best that they can. And there's a story, okay, I have to tell a really quick story because this really demonstrates the point. Okay, there was a situation where there was a family property, and I don't want to get to name names or anything, but there was a family property that we own, and I got a phone call there was some text messages sent out and said, there's a car parked in front of this family property. They shouldn't be here. Does anybody know who this is? Da, 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 da. And I happened to be at work. My mom happened to stop by. She kind of made a comment about it. I hadn't seen my text messages. And she said something about how somebody was really upset about this car that was parked in front of our family property, and it was trespassing and it shouldn't be there. And I had remembered a text that had come through from a friend of mine who had said, hey, do you mind if I park at your place? I'm going to go hike around your cabin. And I didn't respond because I was at work and I was busy and I just didn't think anything of it. Well, I realized that my family member was really upset and was going to call the tow truck. So I called my friend and I said, hey, buddy, I said, my aunt's really upset, understandably so. They showed up. They didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
They had some people that needed to park there. There was very minimal parking in a very little area. So I called. He said, okay, I'll come back. It was this big kerfuffle. They threatened to call the cops, try and get him in trouble for trespassing and all these situations. And I understand it's not their fault. It wasn't right. He didn't have the right to park there. Well, long story short, the next morning he called me and he says, I know yesterday was a lot of kerfuffle, but I just wanted to share with you why I chose to park there. I know it seems like I'm just this lazy 40-year-old man that didn't want to hike further, but the truth is I actually have testicular cancer and I had a testicle removed a couple days ago and I've been really depressed. And my friends were going to go hiking and I really needed to get in the mountains, but I didn't know if I could hike from the base of the parking lot up there. And so I thought, well, if I parked at your guys' cabin, I could probably make it.
Oh.
And it was such, like, to me, like, I kind of use an example in my life that I think maybe they just lost a testicle this week. And I know that Brandon's okay if I say that, because bless him, he would laugh about that. But it's a really good reminder that we don't know what's going on in people's lives.
No.
And it's easy for us to jump to conclusions and think this, you know, self-righteous, or this jerk, or this narcissist, or this egotistical, whatever. But we don't know what is going on in people's lives.
Yeah.
And so giving people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes they will be the narcissist. Sometimes they will be the jerk. Sometimes they will be the a-hole or whatever, right? But we don't know.
Yeah.
And so to give people the benefit of the doubt is also, it's going to benefit them and it's going to benefit us as well, so that we don't find ourselves in situations where we have to take the foot out of our mouth from, you know, making some big judgments about people. So I think that something's really important. Then going back to kind of also what you said about, Botox, getting back to Botox.
Yeah.
This is something that I have to tell you is like my soapbox with what I do. Right? And I absolutely love this. This is something that's very critical to me because I've analyzed this. I'm a very analytical person, very philosophical, and I've thought about this at length for years as I've questioned what I do as an injector. Am I hurting or helping people?
Yeah.
And that's something I take really serious because I grew up in a family that like service, love, compassion is something that's very important. And so I'm always hesitant that am I promoting with my advertising, with my marketing, am I ever sending the message to women that they are not enough as they are? Mm-hmm. And I really hope that nobody has ever felt that with my messaging. I'm very cautious with my messaging and try to be very careful so that the last thing that I ever want is for anybody to feel less than.
Yeah. And
the hope to me and the differentiator is I look at it like a garden or a home. I'm about to start a big remodel on my home. Okay. Now, not very many people would say that I'm vain or a bad person for remodeling my house, planting flowers in front of my house, making sure my grass looks green, my house looks nice. Nobody would call me a vain or bad person for washing my hair, making sure I look pretty, putting makeup on, putting on nice clothes, right? We're not vain for doing that. And the same thing to me goes with Botox and fillers or cosmetic surgery, plastic surgery, things like that. To me, the differentiating line, and whether this is cosmetic stuff or whether it's cosmetic stuff for our home, for our boat, for our whatever else we like, is the biggest question is where do we place our worth?
Yes.
When we place our worth in positions, in titles, in roles that we have, or in appearances, that is when there is problems. So if I as a woman say, oh, I am finally worth something because now I'm married and now I have children, that's a problem. Yeah. Our worth as children of God is infinite. It's unchangeable. It cannot change, go up or down. It does not matter what we do or do not do in this world.
Yes.
And I think that when we start from a position of that, everything changes. Mm-hmm. Everything.
That perspective is life-changing.
It's huge. So we can spend hundreds of dollars on our yard for flowers every year so that it looks beautiful. We can spend money on a remodel. We can spend money on clothes and look
nice. Dyeing your
hair or whatever it is. Yeah. The question is, if I think that I can't go outside my house without makeup on, without looking good, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm hideous, I'm awful, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed, nobody can see me like this, then to me there's a problem with my worth, with my self-confidence. And there's a little bit of some overlap, but I think that they're two very different things. Do I look prettier with makeup on and hair done and nice clothes? Absolutely. But does that change the worth that I offer to myself, to my children, to my husband, to my siblings, to my mother as a human being? No. It does not change. And so to me, I've chosen to go through with this industry knowing that who I am and who I hope to portray and the message I hope to portray to my clients is that Botox and fillers or anything they do or don't do will not change who they are. Yeah. But if it helps them to have a little bit more self-confidence about themselves And this is an interesting story too. I had a client who came in, and I think we've talked about this story actually.
Probably.
Because I know you've met her before, because she's also talked about like sex trafficking and pornography and stuff.
Yeah.
A girl came in to me and she wanted to do some things to her face. And I sensed that there was a lot of emotion around it, because in my mind, I was like, there's nothing wrong. This girl is drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah.
But I knew that there was emotion around it. It was the weirdest thing, but I sensed it. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I did a few things. Well, she came back like 6 months later for some other things. She said, and after I kind of did the things to her face, she cried. And I thought to myself, this is such a minimal thing, and she's such a striking, beautiful woman. Why is she so emotional? But then again, I felt that there was a story behind it, but it wasn't my place to ask her.
Yeah.
When she came in the second time, she mentioned how it made such a huge impact in her life and how she just felt so much more confident. And I said, can I ask you a question? And I said, I don't want to offend you at all. I said, but when you were in here last time, I said, I sensed that there is some type of emotional or physical trauma around what happened. Would you share that with me?
Wow.
And she is such an incredible human. She's like, absolutely. So she told me about how she had been, some things had happened to her and how she had been abused, and her nose was damaged because of this. And so for her trauma was related to that. Wow. And by adjusting a few minor things that were probably imperceptible to most people, changed her confidence around the trauma that occurred.
Wow.
And that is impactful.
That is very incredible.
Yeah.
The psychological, aspect of all of this is so interesting. And that's what I love talking about. And like, I didn't even think of that side of it. Like, I didn't think of how, because sometimes it can probably not be as healing in the most healthy way if we're doing it based on trauma. But if you're doing it in a way where it's like, it's just, I know that was a very important moment for her in her life.
Another interesting thing, it does not matter how beautiful or skinny you are. We all have our own insecurities.
Yes. Yeah. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with too, is they start to almost judge people who they feel like is so beautiful. And they're like, why does this person feel like they're not skinny enough? They almost have like negative feelings because they're like, I am like 30 pounds heavier, and how dare they talk about their insecurities about this? It's almost like they take it as an insult. And I think that's really important for us to remember, hey, even though you view someone a certain way, they view themselves completely different, and it could be in a good way or a bad way.
What motivates somebody? If people are consistent about going to the gym because they're punishing themselves because they think I'm fat, I need to get rid of my love handles, I'm disgusted by my cellulite, that is not a healthy attitude towards that. So it's not cosmetics, Botox, fillers, it's anything. Going and buying a car. Are you buying a car because you want to have a certain image behind it? Or because you're trying to buy something that's comfortable, reliable, nice, whatever?
Exactly.
So that's the most important thing to me, that when I look at these things, as what are our motivating factors? And that's for anything.
Yeah,
that's for choices in life, as far as where are we going to school? What are we doing for career? What do we feel about religion and how we're acting in that aspect? What are we doing in relationships and playing a role that maybe we're not comfortable with? And we will never, in my opinion, we don't find true joy and happiness.
I was about to say that.
Until we realize who we are. And that to me is like the whole point of life, is realizing who we are and making choices based on that. Now that's not some F you attitude. You see some people that I'm like, okay, that's a little in your face-ish. But to me, I look at it as like this humble, quiet thing where you realize like, that doesn't really suit me. Thank you for that. But
creating those boundaries.
Creating the boundaries and realizing what works for you. And then making decisions. And sometimes they're hard decisions. When I got good old 19 years old, and it was really hard. About 2 months into our marriage, my dad actually took his life, which was extremely hard.
Sorry.
And it's okay, but there was challenges in our marriage. Obviously, we started off with me pretty much being extremely depressed. And if anybody's dealt with suicide, they know that suicide is very, very, very hard. It's inexplainable how hard it is, and the emotions that you go through, and the blame and the shame and the guilt of I should have, I could have, I would have type of thing. But after being married for about 2 years into the marriage, my husband at the time came out of the closet.
Wow.
And for him, going back to the point, he did not feel comfortable and he did not feel he was being true to himself with the relationship that him and I had. And so for him, he felt that the happiness that he needed to experience was outside of that. And I am very grateful for him, for his integrity, that he had to share that with me, and how hard that was for him to come to me and say, you know what, I have these homosexual attractions and I need to be true to you and I don't want to cheat on you or lie to you or whatever.
And true to himself.
And true to himself, so that we were able to amicably split so that he could find and live what was best for him in his life and his journey, which freed me to live my best life rather than him doing it covertly or lying. And I think that's something so important, that sometimes we find ourselves in relationships, jobs, husband, wife, siblings, whatever it is, and we realize that we're hiding ourselves. And we hide ourselves to protect ourselves and to protect others. And I know that there are some hard situations. Thankfully, I've had such wonderful support in my life, almost always, that whenever I've gone through different experiences, I've had loved ones say, I love you and I just wish you the best. If you think this is the best for your life, then I support you. And I know that some people don't have that, but my encouragement is to just find who you are and try to do everything within your power. And even though you may lose relationships or friendships, you'll never experience true joy and happiness until you find who you truly are and living your life.
It's worth it. It's worth it. And I know there's so much pain in that process and in that journey. It makes it very difficult when there's that shame. I wish that could change. And I see it changing in certain communities. I see it improving. I know that the coming generations have just, been very vocal about that and the need for it. Mental health has been a really big thing that's become more talked about. We've seen, suicide rates just exponentially increase. And it's so hard and it's so heartbreaking. And I know that as we're more open and as we create this community of unconditional love, it creates safety for everyone. It creates and honestly, we're designed where we seek that unconditional love. We need that. We need that connection, and we seek for people to understand us. And, when that's not there, it creates a lot of issues. It creates a lot of negative core beliefs, a lot of distraction, a lot of misguidance, a lot of hurt and pain. And that then projects onto other people, and it creates these generational patterns. And so I know how strongly I feel, but I just know that unconditional love and eliminating shame is just an incredible step to finding peace and healing, not just within ourselves, but in the world.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, I'm definitely no Brene Brown to know shame, but from my thought, to me, shame comes from a place of fear, right? And so it's like societies, sometimes I think living in certain cultures, we think that, our culture creates shame. And it's not true. It's every culture. Creates shame in different ways. And I think that societies create cultures, and the cultures create shame because society's job is it's like a herd, right? Where you kind of want to push everybody along to a certain degree. And you have cultural norms and expectations kind of for everybody to pull their own weight. And so when you have in religions or organizations or countries or communities or whatever level it is that you have certain cultures and expectations where people don't fit that norm and that expectations, people are scared. So people think, what does that mean if they do it this way versus how we're taught, if they like it this way versus that way, then it's scary to them to think. And so I think that for those who are struggling, that feel like they're outside the norm or feel like they're being shamed, I think it's important that we understand that when people are shaming us or we're feeling not loved, it's the people's lack of capacity to understand what unconditional love is. They're coming from a place of fear, when my parents have shamed me in the past, and I've been very fortunate to not have parents that really use that tactic much. They've always been very supportive in a lot of ways. But when they have, I realize that it's because my mom she wants me to be happy.
Yeah.
She sees how she's lived her life and certain choices and certain expectations, and that's brought her safety and security, and she would say happiness.
Yeah.
And so she wants that from me.
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah.
It's so ironic to me. Unconditional love is what we all seek, but from love, we oftentimes want to almost control other people's decisions because you want them to be happy and safe. And so when you're like, oh, I know that this is what helped me find happiness and safety, and this is what, and there's risks going down this path, and fear. I don't want them to, have to hurt or have this happen to them, should it happen. And it's so ironic to me that, when we crave that unconditional love, shame ends up coming into play from the love we have for other people.
And the funny thing is too,
especially as mother, like parents to kids.
For sure. And taking it even a step further, which is even more interesting. So Dr. Julie Hanks, I've seen this quote on her website or Instagram a lot, is she talks about when people come to you and are maybe making decisions or other things that maybe you don't agree with, what's the best way to respond? And the response is, I love you, and I'm sure this was a hard decision, and you wouldn't have come to this conclusion without much thought and consideration.
Yep.
And I support you.
Yes.
And I think that's so powerful because, again, if you're my daughter, or oh my gosh, my daughter, when she's a teenager, I'm a little terrified, by the way. She is going to be a little crazy. So when she's so feisty, so when she comes to me and she's making decisions that maybe I don't agree with, or maybe as her mother, I think, I've been down that road. I know what that leads to. I don't want you to make that decision. So you can learn from my mistakes instead of do it yourself.
Yeah.
If I judge her, if I shame her, it's only going to push her further away. It is not going, me trying to control her because I'm trying to love her is never going to stop her.
Exactly.
But if I love her and say, I love you, I support you, I'll give you some advice, but ultimately I trust you to make good decisions, then guess what? When it doesn't go well, then she knows she can come to me.
Yeah.
Rather than digging herself deeper,
rather than
having
thinking
to prove
she's
a point.
going to be like attacked and be like, I told you so, and that was so dumb, and I can't believe you did this, and whatever. They feel safe.
They feel safe.
And that's what you're, as a parent, as a sibling, as a wife or a husband, like, that is your role. Like, that is who you really are supposed to be for these people. And there's a difference between love and unconditional love. Yeah. And there are hidden expectations that sometimes we have for those around us that can be very, very toxic and unhealthy, and we don't even realize it. And it's funny because the intentions are good, most of the time, of the time. And even if it doesn't feel that way, sometimes when you're feeling shamed or judged or whatever, sometimes it does not feel like, and maybe it's not, but sometimes it doesn't feel like those intentions are good, and sometimes they are actually, even if it doesn't feel that way. It's very interesting. So coming back to, understanding where people are coming from and not knowing, behind the scenes or what's really going on in their lives, I think that that's just like a really great place to come to whenever we're struggling with people shaming us. Everyone has a certain way they were programmed. There were certain ways that they were wired, and they grew up conditioned their own ways, right? From their parents and from like their grandparents and from those around them. They faced shame. They faced these same things, that we're facing in different ways. And it creates who they are today. And, like you were saying, your mom, she found her safety and peace and what you said that she would say, her happiness in her own ways. But that doesn't mean that it's the same for you. And that's something that I think is really important to understand is like, they might have really good intentions, and it's freeing to be able to realize, what? It might not be their fault that they believe these things so strongly, because that is how they were taught all growing up. And if you were conditioned a certain way, I would probably be the same way too. Open conversations nowadays gives people more freedom to be able to find their own way. And I think it's incredible as we continue to learn unconditional love that, when people make different decisions than we expect, or that we were hoping for, or that we agree with, or what we were wanting for them, truly loving that person is when you're like, I want you to listen to your intuition, you know? I want you to listen to your intuition. I don't want you to listen to me or anyone else. I'm here if you ever want advice, and I can give, you know, my insight. But ultimately, I want you to trust your intuition, trust yourself. And if something goes wrong, let it help you grow, you know? This is your own journey, and it doesn't have to be the same as mine. And how freeing is that?
Yeah, seriously, it's powerful.
It's so like, it makes me emotional. Like, I just want that for everyone. And we might not always have it, and that's where we can be that for ourselves, you know, and give people compassion for where they're at. And maybe if they haven't got to that point of unconditional love yet. And you know what? If they haven't gotten that point with other people, that means they haven't gotten to that point with themselves. And ultimately, that's where my heart hurts. And I want them to have that, you know, deep down. And so I know that a lot of us don't have that. And that's where I want us to know, and those listening, we can be that for ourselves. We don't have to have that from other people.
No, we don't. And it really is when you find it within yourself. Again, that's where so much grounding, so much stability in your life just opens it up. Mm-hmm. When you're able to close the doors, turn off the noise from the world, and just listen to yourself. Because truly, I found all the answers I've ever needed all come from within. Yeah. But it takes practice to learn, and stillness to learn those and to trust those and act upon those. Because we know fear does not come from a higher power. No. And so we know everything right here in our hearts. And again, true joy and peace come when we can listen to that, recognize, remember who we are, and then act on those intuition that we have. Absolutely.
My favorite part of these conversations is the uncensored Q&A. And that's why I love to be able to talk to people who are open. They're willing to talk about hard topics, you know. And I love to ask this question because everyone listening and watching, it helps them be able to connect, right? And even though somebody might not go through exactly what I've gone through, or, you know, people have gone through similar, or they've gone through their own things, and in whatever capacity, we can still relate to each other, you know? And I want to ask you, what is something that is difficult or hard or painful that you've gone through in your life? And what did you learn from it?
I think that I feel really blessed and fortunate the last couple of years that I feel like I've been able to, with the aid of some different experiences, including with plant medicine. Actually, I've been had some really great experiences with that. I've been able to heal a lot from some trauma that I've had. And I feel like I've come full circle and just really changed the last couple of years. And a lot of it started actually as I left a job that I felt was kind of toxic and stepped away and I was scared and stepped out onto my own and trusted myself instead of others. And that's, but as I've done that, and as I've become and realized more who I am, and focused on that and dove inward, I've done a lot of healing. Now I will say that although I feel very at peace about my divorce with my husband, and him and I are good friends, and I love him dearly, and I truly feel like God sent him to me to be there for me when my dad took his life, knowing that I would need somebody. And I'm very grateful for that, even though it was very hard at the time when he left me. It was very, very hard, and I was depressed and suicidal, and it was hard. So and other things I've experienced, I would say though that the biggest challenge for me still is my dad. I miss my dad. I mean, and again, somebody that's gone, you just don't understand unless you've had somebody you love take their life. And knowing the pain that someone experiences and has to experience in order to get to the point that they feel like suicide is the best option. I think that to me is the hardest, is to know that my dad was in that much pain, both physically because of some injuries he had and emotionally. And I think it's also like, there's like this little girl inside of me that I just like, some days I curl up and I cry and I just think, I miss you, Daddy. Like, it's just this little thing inside me. And I used to think when I was younger that like, oh, I'll do this and I'll be healed and I'll be fine. I'll get over my dad's death. And I've realized now that, you know, hopefully if I make it to my 80s or 90s, I will probably be 80 or 90, and on my deathbed, I can almost guarantee that I'll say, I can't wait to see you, Daddy.
Yeah.
And there will never be a day that goes by that I don't think about him or miss him or feel him.
Yeah.
And I think that for sure has been the hardest, but also been such a great blessing in my life because it has taught me compassion. My mother has been wonderful and making sure that we stay a united family, just seeing the loss of our dad and some challenges that that's brought. She has been really good to make sure that us as siblings are very close. And so there's so many good things that have come out of such a tragic, sad event. There's still so many good things. And that I'm really, really grateful for. I'm grateful that I've been able to see the positive, although it still hurts and it always will, that I've been able to focus on the positive so that I allow it to bless my life instead of to control and stagnate my life.
Wow. So powerful. Like, I can't imagine going through that, Hillary. It's just, it makes me so emotional because I've had, you know, people who have been in those dark places that, you know, I just love so much that I just am like, I can't imagine if they were to make that decision. And, you know, it's so hard because I'm like, oh, I want to be there for them enough. I want to, you know, do what I can. And I've been there too. I struggled with suicidal thoughts. It's crazy, you know, when you're in that mindset, because you think back and you're just like, how was I, you know, thinking those things? But, you know, you get there for a reason. There's things that are happening, and, you know, the brain works in very specific ways and it's affected in a lot of ways. And I know that when I was in that moment, I was planning to take my life. And I had it all planned out and I had backup plans, and I wanted to do it in a way where my family thought it was an accident because I didn't want them to go through that pain. And so, you know, when I was about to make that decision, there was something that stopped me, and I'm so grateful that it did. And I can't really explain it, but it was a very impactful moment for me. There were times after that I had those same thoughts where I was just like, I just want to be with my Heavenly Father. Like, this life is hard.
It is hard.
And like, you know, in the moment of going through all that I had, you know, I was going through at the time, I just was like, I just want, even though I felt the presence of my Heavenly Father and my Savior holding me and carrying me, like I physically felt it, there were times where I was just like, I just want to like be with Him. I want to be home. And it was so hard. But that gave me the opportunity to be able to find my why. You know, why am I waking up every day? Why do I choose to wake up every day and get out of bed? And, you know, what's my purpose in being here? And why do I want to be here? And it gave me a foundation that I didn't have before. Yeah. And so it's really, you know, I'm grateful that I was able to overcome that and go through it and learn from it. And I know that you said you had gone through that yourself in different ways. And, you know, if you don't mind me asking, how did you, you know, overcome that?
I think the thing for me through the years of struggling with my own depression and struggling with my own, I mean, obviously, if you can imagine, in a short span of 2 years, when I was 21 years old, my dad had left me, my husband had left me. I was the only one that spoke to my dad the day that he took his life. And so I took a lot of that on myself, and that if I had been enough, you know, he would have killed himself. And same thing with my husband. If I had been enough, you know, maybe he wouldn't want to be gay or whatever. And obviously I had very naive concepts back then.
But those are valid feelings.
But those are valid feelings that that lies that I believed.
Yeah.
Obviously, absolute lies. And so there were definitely very dark days. And as I've gone through my own journey, and still do, because life never gets easy, it only probably gets harder in some ways. I think for me, when I find myself depressed, when I find myself overwhelmed or feel incompetent, don't feel enough, which is unfortunately frequent, I just remind myself, if I have a dark day, I remind myself there's two things that I remind myself of is there's no night that's so dark that the sun doesn't rise.
Yeah.
The sun will always rise.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remind myself of where I've been before. And so when I'm in that dark moment and I feel like giving up, or I feel like my family would be better off without me or anything like that, I remember that I felt that way before, and then I returned to joy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that it's just, I focus, I slow down my life, and I just say, okay, I don't need to do this. I can take that off my plate for a day or two.
Yeah.
And if I need to lay in bed, then that's all I focus on. And sometimes it's minute by minute or hour by hour, but I just sit there and I say, okay, just stay still, Hillary. Don't get up, because sometimes I'll be scared. And I've gotten to the point too where I've gotten really good that if I'm struggling emotionally or other things, I will be very clear with my husband or my mom or people that I know and trust. And I'll say, I'm not in a good place. I need support.
Wow. That communication is so crucial.
It is, but you know what? Like, it's good. Like my mom lives around the corner from me, and she plays an integral part of my life, and my husband obviously, and they're such huge supports to me, and they love me, and they understand that I struggle. And just like my husband struggles and my mom struggles, we all struggle.
Yeah.
And so it's having a communication so that when my mom's having a bad day or I'm having a bad day or my husband, I can say, how can I support you?
Mm-hmm.
Can I do that for you? Let me take that off your plate.
Wow.
So that it's honestly like it's a balancing act of each other. There's days where I'm struggling, especially with like the pregnancy recently. My husband's been great to take extra time to do dishes, do laundry, do all those things. But he knows I just need to lay in bed.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just need to come home from work and lay in bed for half an hour and kind of, get rid of stimulation that I've had all day or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think communicating with the people that you love, unfortunately, many people are scared. If you approach them and you say, I'm not in a good place, I'm having suicidal thoughts, or I'm having dark thoughts, most people would be scared, or they'd say, don't do that, that's stupid, or that's bad, or that's wrong, or that's a sin, or they make really ignorant comments. And again, like with anything, we need to support and validate and say, I'm so sorry that you're having those thoughts. I'm so sorry you're having a bad day. How can I help you? How can I show up for you? Yeah. And most of the time, it's as simple as just being held by somebody.
Yeah, holding space.
Holding space physically or not, just holding space for somebody. So I think communicating, understanding yourself is first most important, and then learning who you can trust. So that when you are in a place that's not good, you know who you can reach out to and be safe with, and say, because obviously you don't want to reach out to somebody that's gonna, kind of, I don't know,
almost
make it worse.
Yeah.
So you just find your safe people that you talk to, and then you're just say, I'm not in a good place. I need some support, and this is what I need. That's
such good advice. I'm so grateful you shared that, because I even had to experience that in finding my support team. And I think that what's good to know with what you're saying is that each person has something that they are able to help with, that they're good at. I've got, somebody who is really good at holding space for me, and maybe that so that I know in that moment when I'm in a moment where I just need to feel heard, and I just need to, I don't really want advice, or I don't really want to I know that that's the person I can go to. But then I also have somebody else who's really great at listening, validating, and then being like, okay, no more crying. Yeah. You got to cry.
Pity party's over.
Yeah, let's go, and you've got this. And so there's really incredible qualities that we all have. And as we are able to really look and identify those in other people and in ourselves, but in other people around us, that's when we can create a very tight circle of trusted individuals that we can have in those moments of need, and communicating that to them and saying, hey, and this is kind of was cool for me, is I got to learn how to communicate and say, I want you to be a part of my circle, my support team. Yeah. And this is why, because I see this value and this quality in you, and it helps me so much. And so are you okay doing that if I have a moment, or if I need a pick-me-up, or if I'm having, some negative thoughts? Is it okay if I reach out to you, in those moments, and you can help me with that? Because you're so good at XYZ, And then that way they have the right expectation. They give permission to you to share it openly, because a lot of that can be very heavy. And And you want to make sure that person's in a good place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too, as I've experienced this with my own family members, is helping people understand, like setting it up, right? Like, hey, I'm calling, I'm having a really rough day. Can I vent to you? I don't need advice. Yeah. In fact, I don't want advice. Mm-hmm. I just really need somebody to hear me out. Yeah. Because I think sometimes I've gotten in trouble myself because I haven't set those expectations up. So then I call and they say, well, you should do this or this. And I go, what? Yeah. You know what I mean? And then I freak out. So sometimes we need to set a qualifier for that. And you and I have been very fortunate that we've had support teams that can help us. But you know what? Even if you feel like there's absolutely nobody in your life, there are hotlines.
Yes.
And utilize those hotlines.
Absolutely. And I know that there might be like a stigma or a stereotype around that. But when you are able to like kind of lean into it and trust, it's nice because those times it can be anonymous, you know, and just test the waters. And so I love that advice. All of this, I think so many people need to hear this. And I'm really grateful, Hillary, that you've been willing to open up about these things because they're very vulnerable and it's very personal. And I'm so appreciative of you being willing to share and talk more in depth about it and give your insights, because I know you know that there's a lot of people out there who are in similar positions or know someone who is. I get questions a lot about how can I help, you know, my friend? How can I help, you know? And it's hard to know sometimes. I think that even just having this conversation, you know, people can recommend this podcast episode, or they now know how they can kind of help somebody else navigate finding their support system, encouraging them, you know, hey, use the hotline, and helping them know that, you know, it's okay if they're experiencing what they're experiencing. They're not a bad person. It's not, you know, selfish of them to have these negative thoughts. I'm really grateful that you were willing to talk about this, because I think I know it will help, and it's been impactful for me too. It's helpful for me too.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so honored to be here, Britt.
Thank you.
I love talking with you.
Well, I want to ask one more question. I like to wrap it up with the question, what to you makes life worth living?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a deep one.
I know. I should have given you more time.
Yeah. Wow. I would probably say the unexpected beauty in the little things. I mean, life is so chaotic. It's so hard at times. I think sometimes our spirits long to go home to where it was easier.
Yeah.
But I think when I really think about the moments that make it worth it, to me, it's the little moments. It's the interactions.
Yeah, wow.
When I'm able to know that I impacted a client, when I'm able to let somebody pass on the street, when I'm able to look at my children playing together sweetly, when my husband and I flying home last week from Mexico, look across the plane at each other 5 seats away, and we can just smile and know what we're thinking. It's those little moments, and it's the relationships with those people. I think that's the most important thing. It's the little things in life. And everything we do day to day, it's about finding those little moments and little ways to connect in meaningful ways with people.
I love that. I love it. I know it's a big, broad question. So to have something that's so simple and something so attainable and something that we can pay more attention to, I'm so grateful you shared that, because it's even a good reminder for me. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Britt.
Hillary, you're incredible. Thank you for being here. What is the title of your company, your medspa? How can people find it?
Yeah, so if people are interested in non-pressured cosmetic services, it is Modern SLC Injections and Aesthetics. So modernslc.com.
Awesome. And then you're located in Salt Lake, Utah. Yep. And what is your Instagram? So people can, I know people like to be able to see the befores and afters, feel comfortable.
It's Dr. Hillary T. It's DrHillary_NP, because I'm a nurse practitioner.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You're incredible. I appreciate you.
Yep, you're awesome. Thanks so much, Britt.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching or listening. If you liked this episode, subscribe and follow along. If there's someone you feel like would be a good fit for the show, feel free to send me recommendations on Instagram at alifeworthliving.show. I appreciate you guys so much, and I'm grateful to have you here. And until next time, have a great week.